The day I found out my husband had a mistress and 2 children with her, I had no reaction. We had met through an arranged introduction, and over the years, we had grown apart. Our feelings long since faded. Besides, he was much older than me, and not very capable in certain areas. I was more than happy when he offered to leave everything behind for that woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with just my son, until his senior from college appeared, making me blush with embarrassment. "How is it you?" I asked Mom. "I'm home. I'm going to take a shower first. Then I'll tell you some good news." My son burst through the door, tossed his suitcase aside, gave me a quick hug, and ran upstairs. I sighed helplessly. This boy was very clever, skipping 2 grades at just 16. He was already starting on university this year. "Liam, be careful, I've just mopped the floor." I called after him. "Got it." His voice echoed from upstairs. "Oh, Mom, my senior is staying with us for the summer. He's going to help me with some extra studying." I smiled, about to close the door, when I met a pair of intense eyes behind glasses. In an instant, my waist was gripped by strong arms, pinning me against the wall. Cold laugh tickled my ear. "What a surprise, Sophia. Your child is so grown up, yet you can still party so hard at the clubs. Should I call you Mrs. I froze, pushing hard against the man pressing me. Terrified Liam might see you didn't tell me you were still in school either. I hissed. "On the day of my divorce, I went out with my best friend and accidentally drank too much in the haze of the nightclub. My resaid desires were awakened by those young men. So I splurged with plenty of handsome guys to choose from. This one, called Alan, was the unfortunate victim of my forceful advances that night. I vaguely remembered how inexperienced he was when I pinned him down, which only fueled my desire to conquer him. He nearly cried. But in the end, I was the one who passed out. I made a mistake and ran away. As soon as I woke up, it had been almost half a year, but I still thought about that experience occasionally, never finding anyone else who suited my taste so well. Seeing his young, handsome face again after so long. My heart raced as I struggled against him, even brushing his chest under his t-shirt made my fingers burn. My breathing quickened as I tried to escape, but he stepped closer, his body giving the most direct response. He was tall and strong. I was no match for him. He looked down at me with a smile as I struggled, running his tongue along the inside of his cheek before fixing his gaze on my lips. "Sophia," he said huskily, "I want to ravish you right now." Suddenly, he bit my ear, making me flinch in pain, my mind going blank, but the tingling sensation that followed spread to my core, setting every nerve on fire, caught completely off guard. I was easily aroused to my most primal desires. I felt a bit embarrassed and wanted to take control, but he glared at me with reined eyes, leaving the only able to smile sheepishly, just as the atmosphere between us grew increasingly strange. Liam came bounding down the stairs, fresh from his shower. "Mom, I'm done." Alan and I instinctively stepped apart. Liam came over, boasting, "Alan doesn't. My mom looks so young, people on the street think we're siblings." "Yes," Alan replied. Liam was so innocent, completely oblivious to the dangerous look Alan was giving me. If not for his glasses, I felt I would have been seen right through, seeing it was getting late. I suggested going out for dinner, hoping to get rid of Alan, but Liam wasn't interested. We had to stay in. He clearly preferred Alan's cooking to takeaway, and kept praising it to me while playing video games with Liam. I glanced towards the kitchen. Alan turned back sharply, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. I quickly averted my gaze. Fragments of that night kept flashing through my mind, even after Liam had tired himself out playing. My heart was still racing, unable to sleep. I went to the kitchen for a glass of wine, lost in thought in the living room. I ended up drinking too much as the alcohol hit me. I saw a dark shadow slowly enveloping me in the floor-to-ceiling window's reflection. Panicked, I tried to run the next moment. A pair of hands gripped my waist, pinning me against the window. Alan's strong body pressed firmly against my lower back. his masculine scent overwhelming me. He applied force domineeringly, forcing me to tilt my head back, flushed with anger and shame. I struggled, but Alan easily restrained me. Twisting my arms behind my back after a brief struggle, I was thoroughly defeated, becoming potty in his hands. Alan let go of me. I demanded I had been drinking and felt a bit dizzy. My usual coldness was gone, replaced by a soft, almost flirtatious tone. Alan pressed close to my neck, biting the most sensitive spot. His icy voice rang out. "Did you miss me?" Sophia. After years in a sexless marriage, I had tasted the pleasures of a young body with little rationality left. How could I resist such temptation? I nodded, without thinking that nod became the start of all sin. I tasted the forbidden fruit again, growing addicted. I desperately wanted to release years of pent-up desire. When I woke up, it was already the next afternoon. The door had been knocked on repeatedly many times before I groggy awoke. Oh no, my son had truly let a wolf into our home. This Alan was simply irresistible to me. Over the next few days, I deliberately kept my distance from Alan. Liam hadn't noticed anything unusual between us. He was just happy Alan could help him study. I heard Alan was only 22, but already in a PhD program. He even had his own company and was doing some research project with his university supervisor. Smart, successful, and kind, too. My plan to get rid of Alan wavered due to my son's attitude. Liam had never admired someone so much before, afraid of hurting Liam. I thought I'd just endure it for the short holiday period, but I was wrong. A young body that I'd already tasted kept appearing before me. I simply didn't have the willpower to resist. As soon as night fell, I went out to a bar with my best friend. She nearly died laughing when I told her what happened. She said I deserved it for forcing myself on a younger man. Now I was stuck and would have to figure out how to escape on my own. I drank silently, quickly, getting tipsy in my hazy state. I pondered how to get rid of Alan while swaying into the dance floor more and more. Restless men crowded around me. Suddenly, a figure burst through impatiently. He punched the man trying to embrace me, knocking him down. Alan grabbed my wrist coldly and dragged me out of the bar. He pinned me against the wall without mercy and kissed me. "What's wrong with you?" I exclaimed. "What's wrong with me? You're the one who seduces me every time. Now you're bored and want to toss me aside." Alan shouted, his eyes reining with anger behind his glasses. Seeing him so hurt, my heart softened. "Don't take what happened between us seriously," I said, licking my dry lips and trying to move away. "If you really must look, I'll pay you. We can pretend nothing ever happened at my age. Satisfying desires was fine, but I didn't want a real relationship with someone so young." Alan's pupils contracted sharply. He breathed rapidly, suppressing rage that could explode at any moment. "Fine. But I don't want money. I want you to sleep with me one more time." Before I could respond, Alan took me to a hotel as soon as we entered the room. He threw me into the cold bathtub. When I sobered up, I clearly saw his icy, narrow phoenix eyes as he removed his glasses. "Watch carefully how I destroy you." Sophia, Alan growled through gritted teeth as he pressed down on me. My desperate struggles only fueled his more frenzy-taking. Afterwards, Alan slowly put on his shirt, standing at the edge of the bed. He took out his phone and snapped several photos. It was too late for me to grab it. Alan smiled as he pocketed his phone. "I'll treasure these, Sophia, don't miss me." A sudden chill ran down my spine as Alan's demeanor seemed rather frightening at that moment. After that day, despite living in the same house, I never encountered him again. Not long after. On one clear morning, Liam told me that Alan had left due to some business at his company. That was the last time I saw Alan. I thought we would never meet again. A year later, I started dating a man named Daniel Carter. He was a year older than me. divorced and had been single since his peaceful separation from his wife after their 3-year-old daughter died in a car accident. We shared common interests, and after 6 months together felt we were well matched and compatible enough to potentially build a life together. Moreover, Liam was very fond of him. We decided to get married during the wedding preparations. I received an envelope inside were a stack of photographs. The first photo was the one Alan had taken that night. To my shock, Alan had taken more than one photo and even included a physical injury report at the end, proving that I had been the one who had forced myself on him all along. I turned pale with fear. Alan, what on earth was he trying to do? I hurriedly told Daniel I had to go, not even waiting to choose a wedding dress before rushing home to dig out the business card Liam had given me earlier. Looking at Alan's name, all those past events seemed increasingly unbearable. I belatedly realized that Alan had appeared with a purpose from the very beginning. If he hadn't approached me for money, then what was it for? I couldn't help but recall the way Alan used to look at me. That ice-cold gaze that hurt to the core, so terrifying. The more I thought about it, the more urgently I wanted to find him. What would Liam think of me if he knew about all this? My family. My everything would be ruined. My mind was filled with fear for several days. I couldn't find a way to contact Alan, feeling helpless and terrified. I dazedly went to the bar where I had first met him. I didn't drink, just sat alone in a corner trying to spot him among the swaying crowd of men and women for about 5 days. I kept vigil there every day, waiting for an unlikely outcome. He never showed up just when I was starting to hope it might all be over. I caught a glimpse of Alan's figure. He was sitting with a group of young lads surrounded by equally youthful and pretty girls all having a great time. I immediately pushed through the crowd, intending to confront him before I could get close amidst the faint music. I heard my name. Alan. You're brilliant, mate, using seduction to get revenge on that old bird, Sophia Baker. H whatever works. This was followed by a burst of laughter. My heart instantly went cold. Revenge. What revenge? What on earth had I done to deserve such vengeance from him? Watching Alan's phone being passed around, hearing them loudly read out my hysterical messages. I tremble with anger. What if his phone contained photos of me? What if everyone saw them? I may not have led a completely blameless life, but I'd never done anything truly terrible. Why did I have to suffer this kind of abuse? Alan had his arm around a beautiful woman's waist. His mocking smile full of derision. He would occasionally whisper something as if showing off, and his friends would burst into laughter again. They kept scrolling through the phone back and forth, gathering around to look whenever they found something new and exciting. I was too scared of being discovered, and this endless humiliation gradually turned into hatred. I wanted to rush over and slap him, but I was afraid of exposing those naked truths to others. Then the whole world would see my shameful state. If it were just me, I would definitely fight back. But thinking about how it would affect my son, I didn't dare do anything. My tightly clenched fists gradually loosened. I fiercely wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes and strode away. At this point, there were more important things I needed to do. I had to figure out why Alan was doing this to me just in case. After a night of deep contemplation, I still chose to break up with Daniel. For now, this was the best decision for both of us. He said he respected my choice and would continue to wait for me. I felt like crying a bit. This man had given me his true heart, and I felt somewhat unworthy of him next, fearing Alan might go after my son. I immediately arranged for him to study abroad on the 4th day. I put the house up for sale online and liquidated all my assets. Both movable and immovable, we had to leave the country immediately. Liam noticed my unusual behavior and was a bit worried, but he was more excited about his new university throughout the process. We communicated very smoothly in the days that followed. I was still anxious and worried that Alan might do something after going abroad. I cut off all contact with people back home. But when I woke from nightmares in the middle of the night, still breaking out in a cold sweat, I couldn't help but check news from home living very cautiously. Fortunately, Alan didn't appear. and my life gradually stabilized. Seeing my son adapt to the new environment and grow up healthy, I felt this was the happiest thing. However, I never expected that the first person from my past to find me would be my ex-husband. It was a rainy day when Liam brought him over. Despite only being apart for 2 short years, my ex-husband looked like he had aged a decade. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red and he burst into tears, falling to his knees with a thud. We had been married for over a decade, and he was Liam's father. Even though we no longer had romantic feelings, there was still a hint of familial affection. I couldn't simply ignore his well-being. I was deceived by that woman, my ex-husband finally said, calmly looking at me with a bitter smile. I betrayed you, and then I was abandoned. I deserve this. I had no other choice. Mom has cancer and needs treatment, but that woman swindled all my money. I came to ask for your help. I even had to my ex-husband glanced at Liam, tears streaming down his face. I lied to our son. I didn't come to see you. I came to beg for help. I'm truly at my wit's end. Mom, please help Dad. Liam pleaded when we divorced. Liam knew the reason he didn't hesitate to stay with me, fully supporting my decision. He was so understanding. How could I bear to disappoint him, all right? How much do you need? I asked generously, not wanting to quibble in front of our son. After all, half of what I have now was earned by him. My ex-husband's gaze wavered as he hesitated for a long time before extending his hand. 500,000, hearing this. A fleeting suspicion crossed my mind, but I knew my ex-husband too well. He shouldn't be capable of doing anything too terrible. I deliberated for 2 days, and finally, unable to resist Liam's pleas, I gave him £200,000 first, with the rest to follow once I could arrange it. My ex-husband was overwhelmed with gratitude and wanted to stay for a while to spend time with our son. Our family of 3 hadn't been together for a long time, and I could see how much Liam you are for his father's love. My eyes welled up with tears, feeling guilty for depriving him of this. At that moment, Liam noticed my sadness and took the initiative to take a family photo with me and his father, even posting it on social media. Little did I know that this photo would lead to trouble 2 weeks after my ex-husband left. Liam went on a field trip with his classmates with nothing to do. I went for a walk along the beach alone. I kept feeling like someone was watching me. But since moving abroad, I had grown accustomed to such gazes and didn't pay much attention. 2 handsome blonde men approached me to chat, and I was able to converse with them, even sharing a hearty laugh. It wasn't until I felt the gaze becoming increasingly dangerous that I looked over wearily. In the next second, my face turned pale, my legs weak, and I stumbled back 2 steps before turning to run. Alan had found me again, just as I opened the car door. A familiar arm wrapped around my waist. I couldn't help but cry out, "If you don't want your son to know about your past, keep quiet." Alan threatened in my ear, causing me to tremble in fear and fall silent. "Lead and go to your place," he commanded. We didn't speak during the entire journey, the air thick with tension as soon as the car stopped. Alan reclined the seat and, with one long stride, pinned me beneath him. When his lips brushed against my ear, I bit down hard on his neck. "Just laughed, Sophia. You're still so fiery." I had angered him, and he wasn't about to let me off easily. He pulled out the seatbelt and bound my hands after a year apart. Alan had become even more aggressive, easily conquering my body. I reached a level of pleasure I had never experienced before, all while filled with hatred's slap. As soon as my hands were free, I struck him across the face. Alan caught my hand, gritting his teeth before flipping me over and pinned me down. "If you have so much energy, let's do something else before we continue our chat." Alan was too skilled. He could drive a woman mad. His beautiful body and face were overwhelming. Once again, giving me the illusion of being completely controlled. Perhaps because I struggled so fiercely, he too grew tired and finally let me go as he always did after finishing. He stood to the side, looking down at me. He had removed his glasses, his deep-set eyes unclear in the dim light. I retreated slightly, only for him to grab my ankle. He pulled hard once again, assuming a dangerous position. I screamed in fear, but he pressed his hand down firmly, using his masculine dominance to threaten me into submission. Sophia, have you played around and discovered that your ex-husband is still the best? Your heart is wild enough one or two men can't satisfy you. My affairs are none of your business, I retorted shakily, eliciting a sneer from him. Some things are my business. I won't let you be with that man. Don't even think about it. Alan released me. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I'm Liam's tutor now. Without me, he won't be able to graduate shameless. This is nothing when I tried to slap him again. He caught my hand. As long as you behave and don't get involved with other men. I won't make things difficult for him, but if you make me unhappy, I'll make you even more unhappy. Alan haunted me relentlessly. Coming every week, he was young with astonishing physical and mental energy that I simply couldn't keep up with. Despite this, he insisted on having me, and no one else. I wasn't conceited enough to think he liked me, rather. I felt he harbored some deep hatred towards me. He wanted to tear me apart for a year. Alan acted like my controlling master, not allowing me to make a move without his permission. When I discovered the hidden cameras in my house, he punished me severely. He did this every time I resisted, as if it was the only way he could vent his frustrations. No matter how careful I was with protection, I still ended up pregnant. Alan was the first to find out. From that day on, Alan spent even more time with me. No more time monitoring me. He cut off almost all my contact with the outside world, except for Liam. I couldn't understand what he wanted from me, a child any woman could give him. That if he wanted one, plenty of women would line up to bear his children. Why did it have to be me? My son seemed brainwashed by Alan admiring him more and more. What I hated most was Alan's gentle, gentlemanly act when he wore his glasses. I couldn't have an abortion abroad, and as the baby grew day by day, my fears and worries multiplied. I realized Alan was determined to have this child. Lily was the only person I could contact, but there were some things I couldn't bring myself to say. I could only very carefully mention my ex-husband from time to time, hoping that given our history, he might sense my predicament. If I couldn't escape Alan, I'd never have peace in this life. Fortunately, Liam seemed to have contacted his father, but instead of him, I was visited by his new mistress. She even brought a 3-year-old child with her. As soon as she arrived, she started a commotion, endlessly berating me for maliciously occupying her ex-husband's property, cheating on him, and bearing an illegitimate child. Then the accident happened in the scuffle. I heard a thud as my belly hit the corner of the table. Pain instantly overwhelmed me, and I fainted on the spot when I regained consciousness. I was in a hospital room. Liam was by my side, along with Alan, whose face was cold as ice. My body had suffered severe trauma, and I stayed in the hospital for over 2 months. My ex-husband came a few times during this period, but I never saw him. I later found out Alan had sent him away. The baby was gone, and I felt relieved. Tell me, what do you really want? The doctor said I can't get pregnant anymore, so you can't force another child out of me. Alan laughed coldly. I want to marry you. My body froze, but after a moment, I felt resigned. I had practically died once already, so why should I keep getting angry at this overgrown child if I really thought about it? Setting aside Alan's underhanded tactics, I had come out ahead. You're only 25 this year while I'm 38. What do you gain by marrying me that I could be your aunt, that you could help raise someone else's son? Hearing this, Alan clenched his fists and stood up abruptly. Think it over and let me know. Otherwise, I have ways to make you agree. As he was leaving, I couldn't help but ask the question I most wanted answered. Why do you hate me? What are you trying to avenge? Alan seemed surprised that I knew. He paused for a moment, then quickly left this time. Alan didn't appear again until I was discharged from the hospital. However, I soon received a summons from the domestic court, and what followed far exceeded my imagination. I never imagined that my ex-husband would take out bank loans to gamble, and that I and several other women would all be victims. The amount reached millions of pounds. My appearance seemed to become an outlet for these women's frustrations. They cursed me, saying I was just as vicious as my ex-husband enjoying life with the money he had swindled from them. After carefully looking into it, I found it all absurd. My ex-husband had been involved with 7 women in total, with overlapping dating periods, marriage dates, and even pregnancy times. He was truly a master of perfect time management. Not wasting a single day, I was the one who had been with him. The longest, and ended up getting the most in the end. But the one who was hurt the deepest was his childhood sweetheart. She had followed him around the country since leaving school at 15. At 19, she had just given birth to a son when he dumped her. When the child was 8 years old, she was beaten to death by debt collectors over my ex-husband's gambling debts. I heard the child developed severe autism. After witnessing his mother's brutal death, he was sent to an orphanage, but was fortunately adopted. Later, the court provided an investigation report. This child turned out to be Alan. He is my ex-husband's son, Liam's half-brother. But he actually towards me madman. When my ex-husband saw me, he cried heartbroken. "I'm so sorry. I've wronged you. I thought I could protect you. I never imagined I'd be schemed against and lose all the money." He slapped himself hard. "I'm useless. I deserve to die. I should have just endured it. Why did I go looking for all of you? It's all my fault. Perhaps he truly did love me. But that love wasn't pure as I was leaving the courthouse." Alan was standing in the distance with Liam happily chatting beside him. It was then that I finally understood why Liam was so fond of him, because of that ridiculous blood relation. I suppose Liam waved to me from afar. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Now Alan's lawyer is really good. You don't need to worry. We'll take care of everything." Alan stared at me intensely, sending chills down my spine as expected. My ex-husband was convicted, and I was left with nothing. No, I still had Liam and Alan, who continued to hold me captive since my ex-husband was gone. Alan seemed noticeably happier. He still liked to curl up in my arms like before. One day he got drunk and mumbled a lot. It was then that I learned just how terrifying Alan truly was. Everything had been his scheme from the time he was 8 years old. He had been following my ex-husband after discovering I had given birth to Liam. He came to see us every week. My ex-husband actually loved me very much. The affairs were all deliberately orchestrated by Alan, time after time. Only this way would my ex-husband suffer. He even complained that the debt collectors were useless, that they should have beaten my ex-husband to death directly, and much more, including having relations with me. My ex-husband loved me, and knowing I had been with another man would surely break his heart. Even my pregnancy was part of Alan's plan. Alan did all this to torment my ex-husband, to avenge his mother. He kept me around because he had grown accustomed to our presence of mine and Liam's. He used to dream of forming a family with us. Now it had all come true. Alan is too frightening. Every day I spend with him fills me with terror. I absolutely cannot act rashly now, and I cannot drag my son into this. Alan is so obsessive. If pushed too far, he's capable of anything. I try to accept my current life to make Alan lower his guard around me. He knows I have no money, and he has all my documents. To a certain extent, he's just keeping me confined in the villa. Fate is truly cruel. After everything, I've ended up back in the original villa, and there are cameras everywhere here. Remembering Alan's words, I get goosebumps again. Behind all these cameras is Alan. They are like his eyes peering into every aspect of my life. I have no privacy whatsoever, completely and utterly. I am an object in his palm at night, could even sleep peacefully beside me. knowing full well I couldn't escape New Year's Eve was my son's birthday today. Liam turned 19, and it had been 19 years since Alan met me. Alan was overjoyed and drank a lot with Liam. Normally, he would never get so drunk, but today, he was too happy. It was the first New Year we spent together as a family of 3. Little did he know how much I had prepared for my escape today as I drugged him. His arms were still tightly wrapped around my waist. Darling, I love you. I truly love you so much in the beginning. I would have been deeply moved by these words. Now my heart remained unmoved 3 years later. I stood on a high-rise across the channel, gazing at the city that seemed so close yet so far away. Occasionally chatting with Liam's girlfriend, knowing my son had found someone he liked, felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Uncle Daniel Liam suddenly called out. I turned around in surprise, surprised to see the man I hadn't seen in a long time. Daniel Carter hadn't changed much. He was still as elegant and gentle as before as he approached me. He nervously adjusted his tie. Liam, may I borrow your mom for a moment? We left the restaurant and walked along the street. He glanced at me from time to time, his gaze shifting before finally settling on me with a nervous expression. He tentatively asked, "Are you ready to start a new relationship?" After experiencing so much turmoil, my heart was already riddled with scars. Moreover, the ticking time bomb that was Alan made me fearful. But the man before me was different. He had accompanied me from having nothing to rebuilding my life, giving me an unprecedented sense of security when we parted before he said he would wait for me. I never thought he would actually do it. I looked at the small unopened box in his hand, my palms sweating with nervousness. You know, I've been through bad things. If it ever comes to light in the future, I will protect you. Protect both of you. He chose me so resolutely, without compromise or ulterior motives, simply loving me purely. I was touched, my nose tingling with emotion. Just as I was about to take the ring, my phone rang abruptly, seeing the unknown number on the screen. I had a bad feeling and hurriedly answered, "Darling, if you dare to say yes, I'll kill Liam." Hearing Alan's voice, I immediately stood up and rushed back to the restaurant, seeing my son sitting and chatting with Alan. I nearly fainted. I grabbed Liam and headed for the exit. Alan looked at Daniel smugly before embracing me. We started arguing. Alan, don't you understand? I want my own life, not with you. You must be with me. We're family only. I know how much you need love. Darling. Alan approached with his usual refined demeanor, each step making me tremble involuntarily. He placed his hand over his heart, affectionately. "Sophia, I know what you want. How could that old man be better than me?" Alan shouted, backing me against the seaside railing. The strong sea breeze swept over us, our breaths mingling. The familiar scent of smoke and alcohol mixed together, bringing back unpleasant memories. I yelled, "But I don't love you." Alan suddenly stopped. "You never loved me at all. I tried so hard to make you happy, to give you joy. Is your heart made of stone?" I looked past Alan to see the man who had chosen me so resolutely running towards me, taking a deep breath. I said with equal determination, "I never loved you. The one I love could never be someone like you who forces me to the brink of death. You can't even compare to a single finger of Daniel's. But when you first clung to me, you said you would love me forever." Alan's laughter turned to tears. He looked back at Daniel running towards us, then suddenly embraced me and jumped into the sea with me. "You are mine. You can only be mine." I couldn't swim as the water engulfed me. I felt an unprecedented suffocation just as I was sinking into darkness. A pair of hands suddenly lifted me up. I was saved, but I couldn't see when I fell into the sea. I hit my head on a rock, damaging the optic nerve and affecting my vision. It wasn't until a year later that I regained my sight. Daniel was still by my side, taking care of me. As for Alan, he was gone forever. I heard he had committed suicide. Half of those who attended his funeral were people who had grown up in orphanages.